Caroline Leavitt had spent enough hours in airplane cabins to recognize every subtle nuance of air travel. The specific pitch change of engines during takeoff, the barely perceptible shift in cabin pressure at cruising altitude, even the particular way flight attendants' smiles never quite reached their eyes during red-eye flights. Yet nothing in her years of constant travel could have prepared her for the moment her fingers, absently searching for the in-flight magazine, instead closed around something far more ominous. The dim blue night lighting of the first-class cabin cast elongated shadows across her tray table as she carefully extracted the crumpled slip of paper wedged deep in seatback pocket 4A. The note was folded haphazardly, its edges worn as if handled nervously, and when she smoothed it open against her thigh, the hastily scrawled message leapt out at her in jagged, ink-heavy letters. "They're watching you. Don't trust the crew." Her breath caught in her throat, the sudden rush of adrenaline making her fingers tremble slightly as she reread the words. Was this some elaborate joke by a bored passenger? A misguided attempt at flirtation? Or, and this thought sent an icy trickle down her spine, was this a genuine warning from someone who knew something she didn't? The flight from Chicago O'Hare to Seattle Tacoma International had begun with all the normalcy of her weekly commute. Caroline had settled into her preferred window seat with practiced ease. Her small silver cross necklace, the same one that had caused such controversy months earlier, resting lightly against her collarbone beneath her blouse. She'd barely noticed the middle-aged man in 4B when he boarded. Dressed in an unremarkable navy windbreaker with a nondescript carry-on, he'd seemed like any other business traveler. But now, as her eyes darted to his conspicuously empty seat, and then to the illuminated occupied sign glowing above the lavatory door at the front of the cabin, a dozen unsettling questions suddenly demanded answers. Had he planted this note? Was he trying to warn her about something? And if so, what possible danger could he have perceived that she, an experienced traveler and former White House staffer, had completely missed? With careful movements designed, not to draw attention, Caroline refolded the note and pressed it firmly into her palm, letting the sharp edges bite into her skin as a grounding sensation. The memory of her very public confrontation months earlier, the flight attendant's imperious demand that she remove her cross, the subsequent viral attention, flashed through her mind with startling clarity. That experience had taught her painful lessons about visibility, about the cost of standing firm in one's convictions. But this felt fundamentally different. This wasn't about personal beliefs or principles. This carried the distinct weight of something darker, more immediate, more dangerous. Her gaze swept methodically across the cabin, taking in every detail. The two flight attendants working quietly in the galley, their body language relaxed, the handful of other first-class passengers either dozing or engrossed in their devices, the steady hum of the aircraft's systems. Everything appeared perfectly normal. And yet, the note's ominous warning pulsed through her consciousness like a second heartbeat, impossible to ignore. When the man from 4B finally returned from the lavatory, he moved with exaggerated casualness, his eyes carefully averted as he slid back into his seat. But the tension radiating from him was palpable. His fingers tapped an erratic, nervous rhythm against his knee, his breathing just slightly too quick and shallow. Summoning every ounce of her professional composure, Caroline leaned subtly across the narrow aisle. "Excuse me," she murmured, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you—" His reaction was instantaneous and startling. His head snapped toward her with almost violent suddenness, his eyes wide with something that looked suspiciously like fear. "Not here," he hissed, his breath warm against her ear as he leaned uncomfortably close. "Wait until baggage claim." Before she could formulate a response, he grabbed an in-flight magazine with exaggerated nonchalance and buried his face in its pages, his entire posture screaming, "Leave me alone," in a way that raised the fine hairs on the back of her neck. As the Boeing 787 began its gradual descent through Seattle's characteristic drizzle, Caroline's mind raced through possibilities with increasing alarm. Who exactly were they? The flight crew specifically? The airline's corporate hierarchy? Some external organization? And why target her of all people? Since that fateful flight months earlier, when she'd refused to remove her cross, she'd become something of an unwilling public figure, a reluctant symbol of quiet resistance in an increasingly polarized world. Had that unexpected visibility somehow put her in someone's crosshairs? The moment the seatbelt sign chimed off with its familiar ding, the man from 4B was on his feet with startling alacrity, moving with purposeful speed to disappear into the jet bridge before she'd even fully unbuckled her seatbelt, leaving her with nothing but questions and that damning note still clenched in her fist. The baggage claim area of SeaTac Airport buzzed with its usual chaotic energy, exhausted families herding cranky children, business travelers checking watches. Impatiently, luggage carousels groaning to life with their burdens of suitcases and duffels. Caroline spotted him immediately despite the crowd. His navy windbreaker, now zipped all the way up to his chin despite the terminal's climate-controlled. Warmth made him stand out among the short-sleeved travelers. He lingered near Carousel 3, his posture tense, and when their eyes met across the crowded space, he gave an almost imperceptible nod toward a shadowed alcove near the rental car counters. Every survival instinct she'd honed during her years in Washington screamed that this was dangerous, that she should turn around and walk away, but the burning need for answers and the journalist's curiosity that had never quite left her propelled her forward through the crowd. "Who are you?" she demanded the moment they were relatively isolated, keeping her voice low but firm. The man exhaled sharply, his eyes darting around them in constant surveillance before answering. "Someone who knows they're tracking your flights," he said, his voice barely above a whisper yet vibrating with urgency. "After what you did on that Dallas-Boston route, you're on a list." Her stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished beneath her. "What list?" Before she could press further, he shoved a small flash drive into her hand with a movement so quick it might have been invisible to any observers. "Watch your back," he hissed, his breath hot against her ear. "And lose the cross next time." Then he was gone, dissolving into the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who knew how to disappear. Back in the sterile safety of her downtown Seattle hotel room, with the door securely chained and the curtains drawn tight against the gathering, twilight, the flash drive's contents turned her blood to ice. A single video file showed grainy security footage of a painfully familiar face. Mallory, the confrontational flight attendant from her previous infamous flight, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with a uniformed man in what looked like an airport maintenance hangar. The timestamp in the corner placed the recording on the same day as their confrontation. Though the audio was distorted by distance and ambient noise, one phrase cut through the static with chilling clarity. "She's a problem. Handle it." The implications hit her like a physical blow, leaving her momentarily lightheaded. Had that entire incident been staged? Orchestrated? Was her simple refusal to remove a religious symbol merely the opening move in some larger, more sinister game? And if so, who was really pulling the strings? The news alert came 3 days later, popping up on her phone as she sat in a quiet corner of a downtown coffee shop. The brief article described a John Doe found dead in a budget motel near the airport. Apparent suicide, no suspicious circumstances. The accompanying grainy security camera still left no doubt. It was the man from 4B. Caroline stared at the screen, a wave of nausea rising in her throat as she read the terse police statement. Suicide. She knew better. Her fingers went instinctively to the silver cross that now lay on her nightstand rather than around her neck, its familiar contours suddenly ominous in the dim hotel lighting. They'd warned her to remove it. They'd warned her to stay silent. But silence had never been her strength, and now she understood with cold certainty. This was never just about a necklace. The cross, the confrontation, the note, the flash drive. They were all pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to assemble, and she suddenly feared what the complete picture might reveal. "Now it's your turn to analyze this mystery, readers," If you found yourself in Caroline's position, an ordinary person suddenly thrust into extraordinary circumstances, would you have the courage to follow this dangerous trail wherever it led? Or would self-preservation win out, convincing you to walk away from secrets that might be better left uncovered? Here's the more disturbing question to consider. Do you believe this is truly about religious expression as it first appeared, or have we stumbled upon something far larger and more systemic at play here? Share your theories in the comments below. Sometimes the most insightful perspectives come from collective discussion. If this story kept you questioning every detail and doubting every assumption, just wait until you see where Caroline's journey takes her next. Subscribe now for more gripping narratives where ordinary people confront extraordinary conspiracies, and where the price of truth may be higher than anyone anticipated.